43% of them had faked an orgasm. I think there's a fair few women, and I used to count myself amongst this contingent, who just don't know whether they've had an orgasm. A lot of men feel like sex toys are the enemy. You just asked me about waving a wand, and I actually have brought one with me.
So, Alix, let's start with the basics. What exactly is the orgasm gap?
The orgasm gap is the gap, or rather the huge yawning chasm between the number of orgasms that men, straight men, are getting to enjoy during partnered sex compared to the comparatively meagre number that straight women are experiencing. And this isn't just a theoretical thing, it's got a basis in scientific research. So just last year, there was a whopping meaty study with just shy of 25,000 people taking part. I think it was 24,700. Adults all ranging from different ages, from 18 to 100, so like a really nice sample size there. And that found that across all age groups, men on average were orgasming between 70 to 85% of the times that they had intercourse, whereas for women, it was a teeny weeny itsy bitsy, unfortunate 46 to 58%.
Oh.
The stats are bad. And there was another study, a little bit smaller, done by Durex, the condom company, very recently. This one was just specific to the UK, 2,000 people, so not as many, but it reflected those same results. It found that 75% of men said they always orgasmed, guaranteed, every time that they got their end away, they were having a happy ending. Whereas for women, it was closer to only a third of them. And on top of that, those women said that they weren't always satisfied with the strength or intensity of the climaxes that they were experiencing. And this isn't just a modern phenomenon either. There was some very famous research undertaken by the Kinsey Group around 1953. Way back then in the 50s, they observed that there was a big old gender disparity gap in the difference between the big O's experienced by men and those by women. And then it was the 1990s that orgasm gap nickname was coined. I think it sounds like quite a good indie band name, you know? Ocean Colour Scene, Oasis, Orgasm Gap.
Orgasm Gap. Yeah, it absolutely does. But it's quite a sad state of affairs. Is it just because men are faster and we don't even enter into the conversation when it's happening? Like, what? Why is this happening?
I think you can already tell, Jennifer, that I enter into the conversation. I'm here to try and change things. But yeah, you are right. There's a tendency for men to tend to finish first, and for their finish to be viewed as the finish line for the entire sexual experience. Men are kind of like the opposite of Pringles, really, aren't they? Once they pop, everything stops. And that shouldn't be the case. So that's part of what's happening here. Men get there faster, women aren't given a chance to catch up. But there are a load of other disgusting ingredients in this foul orgasm gap stew. Partly it's down to social conditioning. For a long time, women have been taught historically, and arguably still are now in certain contexts and by certain voices, that they are lesser, that they are second best, that their sexual role is to prioritize giving pleasure to men rather than receiving and sharing that in return. We do live predominantly in a patriarchal society that teaches us that men literally in every respect come first. And of course, men's orgasms, in the most traditional manner, are absolutely essential for procreation. You can't have a baby without the baby batter, or at least you couldn't back in the day. So they've always been viewed as something that's been essential and important and somehow regal, whereas women's orgasms are a bonus, a nice to have, a non-essential. I think another problem is often when we talk about sex, I mean, if I say the word sex to you, Jen, what do you imagine?
Oh, Jesus, we're going there. I imagine pleasure and I do imagine pleasure is the first thing that comes to mind. See,
well, you're an evolved human being.
I'm evolved. Yeah, well, yeah, but that's why I'm doing this podcast, because, you know, I talk about it enough. I may as well be doing it as well. But I do find, apart from all the attitudes towards women having an orgasm, and it can be seen as a bit of a bonus and all that, there is also the topic of the anatomy. I mean, men's bodies and women's bodies are vastly different and work differently and get aroused in different amounts of time. And we just need that little bit more time and attention, let's say, to get to a certain place. And it is a sad state of affairs that, you know, through all these years, all this research has been done. We're still talking about it. I mean, for God's sake. But I do think there is a bit of a shift, which I want to talk to you about. And how can we, you know, make that gap smaller, and how can we have better orgasms? That's really what I want to get into.
Well, before we do that, let's just talk about anatomy.
Yeah.
Because for a long time, unfortunately, women's anatomy has been misogynistically ignored by medicine. We actually didn't have the first anatomical description of the full body of the clitoris until 1998. It was totally MIA.
1998?
Yes, really recent, right? Before that, all of the anatomical studies that were done were on cows. They were on the genitalia of cows. You have my full permission to have a cow about that, man. It's not all right. And then there's the first MRI scan, again, showing the full anatomical structure in 3D. That didn't happen until 2005.
That's crazy.
So we just didn't know a lot about how women's clitorises and their genitalia were built back in the day. We now know that they're a bit like an iceberg. Not the lettuce, the frozen structure, in that little magic button that you can see on the outside of the body that's usually covered by a hood, that is actually just the tip of a much larger structure that extends down behind the labia. It has two bulbs that fill with blood and become erect, much like a penis, during when you're aroused, and then two legs as well called crura. So it's a really big structure with a really big capacity for pleasure. It actually has more nerve endings than a penis does. So the possibility for pleasure is there.
Yeah.
It's just that, as you say, we don't tend to talk about it, and often we don't give time for it. The reason I asked you what you think about when you think of sex, when I say the word sex, is because whilst I think you're an enlightened person, I think for a lot of folks, they think of intercourse. They think of PIV, penis in vagina. They think of putting a pole in a hole being the sole goal of what's going on between the sheets. And that is great if you've got a wang dang doodle hammer, but not so fabulous if you've got a vagina and a clitoris.
I hear you.
Like the clit just doesn't tend to get lit during penis and vagina intercourse. And as you say, a lot of people need more time than the average amount, the average length of time that sex lasts in order to get off. This is an interesting point because for a long time, I've been in this biz for about 20 years, so that makes me feel more ancient than Stonehenge. But I used to trot out this very well-established bit of research that said women and people with clitorises can take up to 20 minutes of sustained, focused clitoral stimulation, constant clitoral stimulation, in order to experience an orgasm. So quite a long time, really. I'm not arguing that that's not the case in partnered sex, but in my own studies, I find it really interesting that lots of women, when they're on their own, when they're masturbating, when they're enjoying solo pleasure, tell me that they can get there a lot faster. So I think there's some peculiarities and particular aspects of partner sex compared to masturbation that are happening in the mix here, and that we need to consider if we do want to bridge the orgasm gap, if we want to bring more pleasure to everyone of every gender and sex in the bedroom.
So how do we do that? So if we are more likely to get to that place on our own, but we find it harder and it takes longer with somebody else in the bed, how do we fix that? How do we change that? What would your advice be?
Well, first off, I'd question whether the idea of fixing it is really the best way for us to go. I'm absolutely not saying women don't deserve more orgasms. Hell yeah, we do. And if you want to aim to incorporate more orgasms in your partnered sex as one aspect of making your partnered experience better, then frickin' go for it, you know? But I think if we start to judge successful sex by whether or not we are having an orgasm, then that risks making it very, very goal orientated. If you're telling somebody, unless you come, unless you climax, then you're not having the best time. And in fact, you're having a bad time. Then that can lead to yet more heartbreak, which isn't what we want. Um, Again, the statistics as well suggest that we should be a little bit cautious in this regard. There was a study of women that showed that 43% of them had fibbed and faked an orgasm with a male partner. And half of those ladies admitted that the reason they'd done that was to try and flatter their partner. They were worried about hurting their partner's feelings. So if we're then saying we must close the orgasm gap, women must be orgasming all of the time, we must make them commensurate to men, then you might have just more women lying because they feel pressured to come for their partners. Anecdotally, I speak to a lot of gorgeous, delightful, wonderful blokes who have the very good intention of wanting to give their partners more orgasms. And they tell me things like, sex just isn't as good for me unless I know that she's climaxed. Or I won't stop until I have given her an orgasm. And it sounds like a really good ambition, doesn't it? But again, it's pressure on women to come in, and it makes their orgasm in service to men's egos, in service to men feeling like they've done a good job.
And the whole thing about orgasms and feeling pleasure and being relaxed is there be no pressure, you know, in that sense. It has to be quite freeing and quite relaxed. And just going back to what you said about sex, how do we widen up the conversation? Like, how do we, like, sex shouldn't just be about penis and vagina, like you said. It can be just being intimate with someone and focusing on that. I mean, if we open up that aspect of our sexual lives, there's more room for play, right? And more opportunities to have a good time, I suppose.
You're talking my language, 100%. I talk these days, rather than about bridging the orgasm gap, about bridging the pleasure gap. I heard an absolutely beautiful analogy lately that came from a therapist called Dr. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Sarah Nasserzadeh.
Okay.
Sarah Nasserzadeh. Dr. Sarah Nasserzadeh. That is a mouthful for me. Says a lot about my lack of oral skills. But she likened a sexual experience or playtime, an intimacy session, to being a little bit like going to a restaurant with your partner. You go there, sometimes you'll be more hungry than other times. Your appetite will change, your hungers for what you're in the mood for will change. You might not want to eat the same food as your partner. You might not want the same meal that you had last week. You might want something really spicy, or you might just be in the mood for something more nourishing that makes you feel kind of comforted. And I think we should all aim to come away from sex and intimacy the same way as we come away from a great meal, having enjoyed the experience in the company and feeling full and satisfied on our own terms, rather than being force-fed something.
So I love that analogy. And I do think that all comes down to, which you talk about quite a bit, is communicating with your partner, your needs and your wants. But that can be mortifying as well.
Oh, God, yeah. It can be absolutely cringeworthy.
What's your advice on that? How do we have that chat without sounding like an absolute tool or feeling a bit, you know, embarrassed about it all?
I hear you. Do you know, it actually gets my goat that so many sexologists and sex educators talk about how we must all communicate better, and then kind of tell us diddly squat about how, because there is a lot at stake. You know, I think especially if you're in a long-term relationship where maybe you've felt the pressure to fake orgasms for a long time, and you're concerned that communicating about that could absolutely crush your partner's feelings or lead them to question whether, you know, you might have fibbed about other things. Or, you know, it's just unfortunately the way that we are educated or not about sex sets it up to be quite a verboten, stigmatized, nerve-wracking thing. So for a lot of people, it is an embarrassing topic. If you want to start a conversation about sex, my first tip would be don't do it in the bedroom, and don't do it when you're just about to have sex or you've just had it.
Okay.
When you're vulnerable, when you're naked, when you're shivering and quivering, you feel a lot more literally exposed. So making a brew, having a conversation in the daytime, maybe even going for a stroll. There is some scientific basis that says that if you're moving your body and you're walking rhythmically with somebody, it helps to calm your nervous system. And plus, like, just I think being outside just feels a bit less stressful, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you're clearing your head. So choosing the right, oh, there we go. The train is going past
There's
my
the
house.
train.
I promise.
That's not a euphemism.
While we're talking moth, yeah.
And I suppose when you're going for a walk, you don't, I mean, if it is that embarrassing and if you're, you know, putting your pleasures or your fantasies on the table, so to speak, if you're walking side by side, you don't have to look at them, which isn't a bad thing in this instance, right?
No, absolutely. In fact, one of my favorite bits of kit to recommend for anyone is blindfolds, a pair of blindfolds. You might feel like a bit of a twit or a tit at first, but covering up your eyes while you talk to somebody, for a start, it takes away that cringe factor. You know, you don't have to look them straight in the face whilst you're admitting something or sharing something that feels nerve-wracking. But also, it allows your imagination to work. It can be really, really freeing. There's a great exercise that I'd also recommend for people who perhaps aren't used to actually not just saying what it is that they want, but maybe even contemplating it. Lots of us don't actually know at this stage in our lives what it is that we want. And our bodies are always changing, aren't they? And our outlooks and our situations as human beings, if we become parents, if we're in stressful jobs, there are lots of variables about being a human, and thus lots of variables about being in a human relationship. Change is happening all the time. And sometimes our ideas of what we used to like, we just haven't had time to really contemplate whether they have changed along with us. So one exercise that's really good at putting that into practice is called bossy massage. It was invented by a sexologist called Dr. Betty Martin. She did loads of great work on consent. But she, for a start, says it's just a body massage. You don't have to go anywhere near the tits and the bits. You can keep genitals off the table. So again, that lowers the pressure. You know, it's not just all about sexiness. And she invites one person to be the person receiving the massage and one person to be the giver. The giver is not allowed to touch the receiver until they are given precise instructions as to where they want to be touched, how hard, what kind of stroke. So the person receiving really has to think, you know what would feel nice to me? Not what does my partner usually do or what do I usually let them do? What's our autopilot? But more, what would really feel nice to me now? And then they have to vocalize that and be as specific as they can. And for the giver, the person with their hands about to go on the glands or wherever, they have to notice where they might rush. Maybe they actually feel a bit peed off about some things they're hearing. It's good to be curious and interrogate why that feeling is coming up. Where do you maybe assume that you know better than your partner about what they want? Where are you too fast? Where are you too slow? It's just a massage, but it can teach you all sorts of things and help you to communicate with each other in a way that you can then transfer to something maybe a bit saucier.
I really like that. That's a really nice thing for couples to do. Can I ask you, is there such a thing as an orgasm workout? Like, can you literally train your body to be better at pleasure?
You can. I'd say the first workout is for your brain, really, which sounds like a trite. It sounds like it sounds like a bit of a cop-out.
No, I get it. I get it. Are you going to say, so I'm going to presume what you're going to say, is it like figuring out what you like and what you want, first of all? Is that what you're going to say?
I think
like that?
That's a big thing. The only reason I do say that is because I think there's quite a few programs on the market that sort of particularly, I can see why they're appealing. They're sort of like a gynecological gym that tell you if you do X exercises, then these exercises will fix all your problems. And I think there's only so much you can do with your body if your head isn't aligned. But absolutely, there are physical things that you can do to make your experience better. I'm guessing that Kegels are on your radar. Have you heard of them? Pelvic floor
Yes, I'm doing them now. As soon as somebody says Kegels, I start doing them. I don't know what it is.
Well,
it's a good thing.
Because I can't tell. My eyebrows move when I'm doing them.
I did learn. I did speak to a nurse once, and she goes, there's a big misconception about Kegels that a lot of people think they have to pull up through the vagina. It's actually through the butthole. You have to clench your bum, and that's how you do a proper Kegel, and hold for a few seconds.
You are bang on. So your chances of having a good banging session are better than most people.
Thank you. I've been working hard.
You can also get like little internal weights, so that you're doing a bit of you've got a bit of resistance there to your exercises. Have you heard? I've actually brought a little toy with me. Have you heard of this? The Elvie.
No. What is that?
Get it out of the box so you can have a look.
It looks like a mouse for a computer.
It kind of does. It's quite high tech. This is one of a number of toys on the market. There's another one called PeriFit that's pretty good. Let me just get it out.
I'm still doing my Kegels, by the way. I'm still
teeny little thing.
Okay.
This goes inside your vagina, and it has a pressure sensor in it that syncs up with your phone. So it checks that you're doing your exercises correctly, that you're squeezing the right part, and you're squeezing with enough fervor and fierceness and ferocity. And every time you squeeze, it moves a little ball in a game on your phone. So it's essentially like a PlayStation for your puss.
I want that for Christmas. I want that. I was watching and listening.
It definitely makes things more fun. I would caution though, do check with a specialist before you do loads of Kegels and pelvic floor exercises, because for some people you can actually make yourself too tight.
Okay.
And that can cause problems in itself. So just know about what's going on with your muscular situation. But then once you have toned those muscles, the pelvic floor is those muscles are integral to the motion that happens during an orgasm. That's that kind of whoosh of unclenching. Your pelvic floor muscles are right at the center of that.
Okay.
So toning them, and also just being aware of what that feels like and where those parts of your body are, can help you to kind of push things along if you feel like you're getting close to an orgasm when you're playing.
And if someone has never actually had an orgasm, like never, and I know there's women out there listening and this applies to them, or they're not sure they've had one, where's the safest, least awkward place to start? Is it with yourself in a bedroom with a sex toy? What do you think?
Any of those women who are listening, who are so far anorgasmic, who haven't had an orgasm yet, you're absolutely not alone. I think there's a fair few women, and I used to count myself amongst this contingent, who just don't know whether they've had an orgasm either, because I think with men and penis having folks, there's a visual element, isn't there?
There certainly is.
There is usually, in most cases, there's a very clear signifier that the big O has
happened. Yeah.
Whereas for women, there's a whole A to Z of possibilities, aren't there? You know, you can feel like a little frisson or a tickle, and until you actually have a big one, it can be a little bit mystifying as to, you know, whether you've got there or not. I definitely think exploring yourself, doing what works for you, by yourself, for yourself, that's the fundamentals of understanding your own body, I think. There's some really great guides to sex toys out there. At the moment, clitoral suction devices are really popular, and I think they're amazing. Things like the Womanizer, in fact, they were the people that patented that tech. They're brilliant, but if you've never had an orgasm before, or you've never played with a sex toy before, you might find those a little bit potent. It's quite a full-on kind of feeling. So maybe go for something like more of a squishy, marshmallowy kind of bullet vibrator is a good place to start. The Rampant Rabbit is a very popular
classic.
Yeah. There's a Japanese brand called Aroha, who I really like, that produce more kind of delicate, soft, silky toys that are less intimidating potentially for beginners. What I would say though is even if you do experience an orgasm alone, there's no guarantee that what your bod does on your Todd will be something that you can absolutely replicate with a partner. It's definitely a good place to start, but I think there's a number of other things that happen when someone else is in the room. For a start, I think there's a problem I have named Noverwhelm. When you're so overwhelmed by what's happening in a partnered situation that you are too overwhelmed to achieve orgasm. There is no orgasm because there's too much overwhelm. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, the smell of your partner's beautiful body, the feeling of their skin, what they're saying to you. It's a lot of stimulation and that can be gorgeous. But I think a lot of women really need to focus on their feeling and almost kind of like block out everything around them in order to reach orgasm. And you can do that more easily on your own than you can with someone else there. So Noverwhelm can be a thing.
I like that. And what about men who genuinely want to do better, but they just don't know where to start? How can they show up as allies without, I suppose, just overthinking it all the time?
Bless them.
Yeah.
Good on them. Maybe co-learning can feel like there's less of a problematic power dynamic.
Okay.
So let me make that a bit clearer. If you're just asking your partner, oh, what can I do? You tell me. Then for a start, that's quite a big ask, can't it? You know, it can feel a little bit intimidating for the woman to think that it's on her to tell her partner everything that they've got to do. But it also, for the man, can feel a little bit like he's the total beginner. And, you know, it can just feel like the power dynamic is slightly out of balance. And for some people, that scenario can just feel a bit icky. So rather than putting it all on your partner to teach you, undertaking a course together or learning something together places you both as the students, and it can feel a little bit easier having an external teacher. So that might be a couples therapist, or it might be someone like an instructor on an online course. There's a really great repository of courses on a platform called Beducated, aka YouTube.
Okay.
Teaches you all sorts of things from the basic mild stuff to the like S&M wild stuff. But I think it's a really good place for couples to start and for men to start if they want to learn. I also think a lot of men feel like sex toys are the enemy. They worry that something that vibrates at super speed or that has, you know, that plugs into the mains and has much more power than their fingers or their tongues or their penises ever could have the capacity to create. They see that as quite a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're collaborative, not competition, I once heard.
100%.
Yeah.
They're on your team. They're not your rivals. But I often tell men, think of toys as tools. If you were told you could go outside and cut a tree down, either using your bare hands or using a chainsaw, you wouldn't think that you were a loser because you had to use the right tool, right? It wouldn't be an affront to your masculinity or to your body. To be good at that job, you would learn how to use that tool and how to wield it like a freaking sexy lumberjack. So whether you want to cut down some firewood or whether you want to start a fire in the bedroom, admitting that tools can be part of your repertoire and on your side is a great way to get the job done.
I love that. We need to talk about sex education, because you worked on sex education, which is probably done more for teenagers in Ireland and England especially than most schools when it comes to sex education. What were you trying to get across?
Oh, do you know, I actually saw the director, Ben Taylor, this weekend at a party, and it was so lovely to chat to him because it's a good few years ago now, but it's such a career highlight for me. I was brought on initially because at the time I was working for BBC Radio 1 on a project that was aimed at young adults and youths, using that. That makes me sound ancient again, doesn't it? I've probably got some Roman coins in my pocket. Wheel is a brand new concept and fire is hot new stuff. I was approached because I was doing a lot of work with younger audiences, and I had this huge collection of real life stories I was doing a podcast at the time called Unexpected Fluids, which was real life tales of sexual fails that we presented in this very comedic way and then used as a springboard for education. And sex education wanted to do something very similar. Primarily, it wanted to entertain, but it also wanted to educate. I use the phrase hiding the vegetables in the bolognese a lot, because the most important thing was that this was something, a show that people wanted to consume.
Yeah.
They had to want to watch it. They had to want to lap it up. And if it was too preachy, or if it felt like their tutor, telling them what to do, then people would have just switched off. So we had to make it fun, warm, welcoming, inclusive, and then slip the facts in. And that was a big part of my job, making sure that it was funny, but also factual. I work a lot with HIV activist groups and charity groups. That's a cause really close to my heart. So one of the scenes that we created was a nurse talking to a young character from the show who was worried that every depiction of gay sex that he'd seen on screen ended up with someone dying of AIDS. And I had the opportunity to work with the rest of the scripting crew to include some information about how modern medicine means that provided you find the right pills or the right injections for you, you can reduce what's known as your viral load, the amount of virus in your blood, to a point so low it's known as undetectable. And at that point, you cannot pass the virus on. You are untransmittable. I think that is the most wonderful
news. It's incredible. I mean, I remember speaking to a HIV activist as well who was telling me about this drug, and it just made me think how far we've come with medicine, and especially with HIV, and what, like, this person said he can have unprotected sex with his partner and not infect because of this drug. And this is just, I'm just repeating what he said, but it was just phenomenal. And there's so many misconceptions about HIV and that kind of stuff. So it's so good to talk about. It must have felt amazing to be able to do that and get it across on the mainstream.
Exactly that. It was a real thrill to be able to spread that good news.
Yeah.
And it's really well proven as well. There were two big analyses called the Partner 1 and the Partner 2 studies that basically involved a lot of people fucking. A lot of people where one partner had HIV and the other one didn't, having unprotected sex, but who were on this medication. And I think in the first study, there were over 50,000. I've got the exact 58,500 incidences of condomless sex. HIV was not passed on once. And then they did the study all over again with 800 gay couples who had more sex. I know they're very, very proud of that, the gay community. Again, one HIV positive partner, one HIV negative, on the medication, not using condoms, not a single transmission. The medicine works. It was my joy to be able to tell people about it.
Well, you light up when you talk about sex. You light up when you're obviously very, very passionate about what you do, and keep talking and keep spreading the word. Finally, I just want to ask you if you could wave a wand, or let's be honest, like a vibrator, like around the place, and change one thing about how we talk about orgasms, what would that be?
I'm actually going to give you two things. I'm very good value like that. First of all, I think the letter P comes after the letter O in the alphabet, and I think we should evolve to that next letter. Rather than talking about orgasms, let's talk about pleasure more broadly. And you just asked me about waving a wand, and I actually have brought one with me. What I have here is a doxy wand. There is nothing understated or subtle or discreet about this. I'm going to turn it on for you. Here we go.
That looks like something you'd curl your hair with. Wow.
It looks like something you'd hit a rounders ball with, doesn't it? It looks like a bat. The company that originally made this have a background in industrial scaffolding.
Of course they
do.
Show.
This is a fantastic toy. It can pretty much get an orgasm out of a stone.
Wow.
I've seen it work through genes. If you are somebody who's previously anorgasmic and you've tried other sex toys that haven't touched the size, this is a really good one. But the point I'd like to make is I think we often talk about sex toys and sex more broadly as needing to be discreet and hidden, and we're still quite shy about it.
Yeah.
I would like us to be more bold and place things that might be unsubtle but are very, very efficient and effective over being shy and being polite.
We deserve it. I love it. Alix, you're an absolute star. I love everything about you. And thank you so much for being on the pod today. Mwah!
It's literally been my pleasure.
Woohoo!